The Jimmy Butler situation just gets worse for the Miami Heat. Butler has now reportedly met with Pat Riley face-to-face and asked for a trade. What does this mean for the Heat moving forward, and what is Jimmy Butler going to do? New rumors of what he may do with his player option. I'm Trevor Lane. This is the Basketball Bulletin. Make sure you subscribe right here to the channel. We're going to keep you up to date on all things trade deadline. All right, take a look here. This is from ESPN's Shams Charania. Still getting used to saying ESPN and Shams Charania, but Miami Heat star Jimmy Butler reiterated to team president Pat Riley in a face-to-face meeting. Man, I'd have to imagine that meeting was probably pretty icy between the two last week, that he wants to be traded. And get this, Butler told Riley he will not sign a new deal in Miami and intends to only use his $52 million player option in the offseason of 2025-2026 as a trade maneuver. So that is a different break layer. So now we've got suggestions that Jimmy Butler may not be dead set on opting out of that $52.4 million player option, and he may actually consider picking up that option if he can use it as a trade maneuver. He's trying to make it clear that, hey, if I pick up this option, I'm not doing it just so that I can stay with the Miami Heat. No. I'm picking up this option only if I can be traded away. I don't want to be here. I won't stay here. I won't sign a new deal here. All of these things, these are all the things that Jimmy Butler is telling the Miami Heat, which should push us that much closer towards a Jimmy Butler trade. Now, we've got until the February 6th trade deadline. Here we are, January 14th. Obviously, the clock is ticking. The Miami Heat, if they want to move Jimmy Butler by the trade deadline, they've got to get to work. Finding the right team for him is going to be a little bit tricky, particularly with Jimmy already reportedly shooting down certain teams. Like, I think this was a huge mistake, but saying that he doesn't want to play for the Memphis Grizzlies, he's insane. The Grizzlies would be a great fit for Jimmy Butler, but hey, he doesn't want to play for them. He doesn't want to play for them. The Milwaukee Bucks, it seems like what Jimmy Butler is doing is shooting down the Grizzlies, the Bucks, maybe a few other teams in order to steer himself to the Phoenix Suns. Well, the problem with that, as we've talked about, in order to get to Phoenix, Bradley Beal would have to be the piece leaving the Suns. And not only does I don't think Beal is an attractive piece for any team to land with $50 million under contract this year and 2 more years left on the books after this, including a player option at the end. Man, that's got to be the worst contract in the NBA, right? If we did a show all about the worst contracts in the NBA, Bradley Beal has to be the very worst, particularly because not only is it a player option at the end of it, but he has a no trade clause. If you haven't heard, a no trade clause for Bradley Beal, which will allow him to prevent any future trade and allow him to stop any trade to a team that he doesn't want to go to. So extremely tricky situation. But Phoenix right now seems to be the only team that wants to pay Jimmy Butler on his big contract. And that's a big part of this. Because let's face it, if the Miami Heat were giving Jimmy Butler the extension that he wanted or had given it to him, he's staying long-term in Miami. Now, maybe he's so upset with them right now that if they offered it now, he would still say, no, F you, I'm out. Maybe. But this all stems from money. This is where this is all coming from. Jimmy wanted to leave the Miami Heat. It's all coming from the financial side of things. That's the big problem here for Butler and the Miami Heat. He wanted a contract extension, and they said, yeah, you're 35 and you miss a bunch of games every year due to injury. We don't think you're worth the contract extension that you want. Jimmy feels insulted because, well, he's done a lot for the franchise, gotten them to 2 NBA finals and all of that. And here we are. Emotions get involved, and next thing you know, you've got trade demands. So moving on here, Butler's 7-game team-issued suspension from the Heat for what was termed detrimental conduct ends on Thursday, at which point the Heat will be faced with finding a path forward for Butler, with options including a return to the roster or a trade. Heat officials will meet later this week to discuss the best route. He had requested a trade earlier this month. So here's the deal. The NBA has rules that prevent teams from just benching superstars, particularly in nationally televised games, things that the NBA doesn't like this reputation for players load managing, right? They don't want that. They don't want that reputation out there. The NBA even released their findings a year ago about why load management does not work, sending out to every single team, the scientific data behind it, all of that. Of course, the NBA being a biased source on this, though, of course, they're going to say load management does not work. But nonetheless, they want to shed this image of being a load management league. And so they have rules in place to prevent teams from resting superstars in particular games, especially if there's not an injury designation. And Jimmy Butler meets the qualification as a superstar. So it gets very, very difficult for Miami to just keep Jimmy away from the team. It's not the same as like the Clippers and PJ Tucker. PJ Tucker hasn't played a game for them all season. He's been away from the team. That's different. He's not a superstar. For Jimmy Butler, the NBA rules could make this very tricky for the Miami Heat. They have to basically play him. But the Miami Heat have suggested that when he does play, he is not getting it done. He's not giving forth his best effort. In fact, this is what Tyler Hero said, and this is the other thing. It's a distraction for the Miami Heat themselves. Tyler Hero said, this is what we wanted, just to get back on the road, get away from all the chaos, rallying around each other, making it about the guys that are here now. We got enough. Like, yeah, right? If you're a player on the Miami Heat, you have to feel some kind of way about all this. This has to be a distraction. So that's the other thing. Miami badly wants to make the playoffs. If they don't make the playoffs, they've got future draft capital that will become unprotected. So they have every incentive in the world, but beyond just they feel like they've got a team that can actually make some kind of a run here. They want to make the playoffs. They don't want their players to be distracted. They want to win games right now. The best path for all involved is a trade, but that's really tough to do when no one wants to pay Jimmy the contract that the Miami Heat don't want to pay Jimmy Butler, except for the Phoenix Suns, but you can't get him to the Suns because it would take a Bradley Beal trade, and no other team wants to give up stuff. I think the best path is still the Golden State Warriors as an option for Jimmy, doing something with Kuminga, doing something with Andrew Wiggins, and I think if that was offered, it would be done right now. We talked about it yesterday, Donnie and I did, on that Bleacher Report article that we were poking fun at, but the offer that was there was Andrew Wiggins and Jonathan Kuminga. The one they hypothesized, there was, I think Kyle Anderson was in the trade, and just some pieces going to Miami in exchange for Jimmy Butler. That makes the most sense. But I'll tell you, I understand why even the Warriors would hesitate in that situation. I know that the Miami Heat would say yes, but I understand why the Warriors would say, do we really get better if we turn Andrew Wiggins and Jonathan Kuminga into Jimmy Butler? Certainly he's the better player, but what if things don't go well? That's the other thing. Teams now have to consider this. What if things don't go well? Because now we're seeing what an annoyed, angry Jimmy looks like. Now we're seeing what that's like. And other teams have already seen it in the past when we talk about Minnesota. But now teams are looking at this and saying, what if things don't go according to plan and then we're dealing with this in a year? Do we really want to put ourselves in that situation? That's the other thing that teams now have to consider. I mean, you've got Jimmy making videos at his coffee shop and, you know, taking subtle shots at the Heat organization, all that. Other teams see that and they go, no, thank you. We're not interested in being in that business and then having to deal with that. I don't want that to be us in that situation, seeing the way the Miami Heat are having to deal with it. So all of this seems to be headed towards a divorce between Jimmy Butler and the Miami Heat. That seems to be where this needs to go. The Heat are good enough this season to make some kind of a run. They're not a contender or anything like that, but could they get to the second round in the East? Sure. You look at them right now, they're the 7th seed in the Eastern Conference. They can battle their way out of the play-in. I think they're a team of the quality to do that. And so if you're Miami, not only do you have the future draft capital issue, but you've got a team that isn't terrible even without Jimmy Butler. You can win some games. So if you're Miami, there's incentive to get this done sooner rather than later. Move on, clear the air, get some pieces back that can help your team, and off you go. And if you're Jimmy, the whole point is to find a team that will pay you. And so if you can find that team, it makes sense to say, yeah, I'll sign with this club or whatever. But as long as Jimmy is shooting down options like the Grizzlies, again, it would be a great fit for him. Unless they simply don't want to give him the long-term contract that he wants, he doesn't agree contractually. That's the other problem. If you're Jimmy Butler and you are stopping trades from happening by saying, I don't want to go there and I'm going to leave in the summer when I can be a free agent, that's going to scare away suitors. So the situation is tough to appease everybody. Miami needs to get pieces back that they think will help them win this year. Jimmy Butler needs to go someplace that's going to give him his contract that he wants. That's the whole root of this whole thing, is the contract situation. And then the opposing team has to be willing to give up the stuff that the Miami Heat want in order to give Jimmy Butler the contract that he wants on the next deal. So think about that. Not only do you have to be willing to pay Jimmy Butler what it is that he wants, the number that the Miami Heat are not willing to give him. You have to be willing to give him that. Plus, you have to be willing to give up stuff from your roster right now in order to get Jimmy Butler so you can give him that kind of a contract. It's a tall order. And I'll tell you what, unless the Golden State Warriors come around on doing something around Kuminga and Wiggins, I think it's possible this does go through the trade deadline with so many teams kind of backing away. And the worse this situation gets, typically you would think the worse it gets, the more motivation Miami has to get a deal done. I don't know if it's Miami holding this up. I don't know how many teams right now look at Jimmy Butler and say, yeah, that's something that we want to get involved with. So I think it is a pretty shallow market for Jimmy right now. And on top of that, the Heat have to get stuff. They don't want to take back bad salary. They have to get stuff back that they think can actually help them win games right now. But again, the big shift here, Jimmy Butler actually meeting face-to-face with Pat Riley and not only saying, I want to trade, but saying, I will only opt in to my contract for next year as a trade maneuver. Boy, what a rough concession to have to make. Okay, I guess if I have to, I'll even take $52 million. Life is tough, isn't it? Isn't it? What a concession. What a sacrifice. I guess if I have to, I'll take $52 million. Wouldn't we all be so lucky? But will not sign a new deal in Miami, will not stay, and will only use his trade option not to stay, or his player option not to stay with the Miami Heat, but instead he will only use that to help facilitate a trade. This situation, it just keeps getting messier and messier, and we'll see where it all lands. I fingers crossed for everybody involved that this gets resolved by the trade deadline, because at this point, this is such a toxic situation. Jimmy needs to get out of Miami. Miami needs to get Jimmy off their team. Everybody needs to move on. I hope that somehow, some way, they find a way to get him off this roster by the trade deadline, because this situation, it's just getting worse and worse. But who do you guys side with? Who do you think's in the right here? Is it Miami or is it Jimmy Butler? Who did the other side wrong here? Give me your thoughts in the comments down below. Go check out our latest video all about the dumbest trades we've ever seen. Go check that out right now.